No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, we're going to be going over part 5 out of 5 in our 5-part series that we've been doing for the last few weeks on 5 commitments leaders can make in difficult times. The article by Ken Gosnell from the Forbes Leadership that was posted the early September. Please go back and listen to the previous 4 Mondays if you haven't yet. I think they're great episodes and they build on each other. The very first episode, we talked about committing to learning from every person and every experience. And then we talked about committing to finding and fighting for your passion, then committing to delivering twice as much value to everything. Last Monday, we talked about committing to rewarding team members and those who help you in kind of unique ways. And today we're going to be talking about commit to replacing the word can't with will. And I'll tell you, this is the only one where when I read them, the kind of the headline of the title really made me roll my eyes. Come on, really? We've all known those people who have said, can't is not in my dictionary and we will do it. And it's like, yeah, I get it. I get having a positive attitude, but there are people out there who take that to the extreme where they double down when they should be turning around or changing course. It's like this commitment to not failing leads them to make decisions that they shouldn't be making, as opposed to rethinking or reevaluating. And sometimes there are things you can't do. And I think leaders who do that the wrong way end up kind of falling through as opposed to following through on commitments and promises, and they end up being the leader that nobody follows because they keep committing to things and then not being able to hold to them. So there is a way to do this right. There is a way to replace the word can't with will in a way that doesn't lead people to stop trusting you over time. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I had the same reaction that you had when I read it. I was like, oh no, we're in a leadership guru conference.
Yes, the reality distortion field conference.
Yeah, exactly,
yes.
Right, yes. I think what I take from it, and especially in this context, is that for me, it's more about a mentality than it is an action. It's not like when somebody says hey, Chris, we just can't do this. Nope, we will do this. Haha. That's not the idea, right? I think the idea here is really considering requests or approaches or challenges and having kind of this mental idea or mentality around saying, well, what could we do? If we can't get that deal done, if we can't make this happen by this deadline, okay, well, what's the reason why we feel like we can't do that? What can we do? What will we do to make what we can make work by that timeline? I think it's just really listening and considering and checking off, whether it's your own kind of mental gymnastics of what could happen or bringing people along for the ride and having conversation about it. For me, that's kind of what I get out of this section of the article is that idea. Is don't just shut things down initially. Don't just believe that things can't be done. I think what we've discovered over especially the last handful of years here is that we can do a lot of things that we never thought could be done before. There's a first time for everything. That's why it's kind of called the first time. And let's actually put some energy into what can we do without maybe just on the surface of believing that something can't be done.
Right. Here's my my parenting reference, because it's been a while since I've had one in here. I think about when I'm helping one of my kids with homework and they say, I can't do this. I can't do this. We've gone over it a couple times. I've tried my best to help them kind of grasp a concept that maybe they didn't grasp when they were in class, and so they're at home with me and they're trying to grasp that concept a little bit more, and they end up saying, I can't do this. Well, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, what's the alternative? Okay, let's assume you can't do this. Well, then I guess it's time to what? Put away the books and go to bed, and you go up to your teacher and say, hey, you know what? I really tried. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to do this section. If you play out what happens when you say, I can't do this, it becomes ridiculous, right? Which means which means you can do it. You can do it if you put your mind to it. It just takes that moment to break through where the light bulb goes on and you start getting it. Just because you haven't been able to do it thus far doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that what we've done so far in order to get where you want to go hasn't gotten the job done. It means we got to think outside the box on how to get that job done. The other thing I think about when I think about this too is that usually when people say I can't do something, they're not talking about the end goal. They're talking about a particular part of that goal, or they're talking about a way to get to that goal, and they think it's the only way. Here's a great example. When you are really short-staffed on something, if you're in the retail or service industry and you're a leader and you have a lot less people than you need in order to get your job done at this time, it can be very easy to say, I can't get this done with the number of people that I have. It's not I can't get it done, it's I can get it done in this way. Maybe I can't get it done in the way that I've always gotten it done when I had twice as many people, but that doesn't mean you can't get it done. It just means that you'll have to get it done a different way than you've gotten it done in the past. Whatever the destination is, whatever that end goal is that you're trying to get to, it's very rare that you can't get to that end goal. The can't applies to a step along the way or one component of it. And that doesn't mean you have to abandon the entire plan or the entire goal. It means you find a different way of getting to that goal. And I think that's where leaders can replace can't with will in a way that allows them to kind of think outside the box and to not, make commitments that they can't follow through on.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing. So I in your example, so you have somebody that comes to you and says like, I can't get this time off because other people have the time off. And then we also live in the reality of like, well, if somebody really needs the time off, if you really need the time off, Chris, if you're saying, hey, I'm trying to get this time off because I have this thing going on with my family or my child, or I have to do this, and I've attempted to get the time off, and systematically, for whatever the reasons, we're short-staffed, it's holiday, it's peak time, whatever the case is, the answer is like, systematically says you can't be done. Well, you and I both know, if it's important to you and your family, you will figure out a way to make it happen.
Sure.
Right?
Of course.
Right? Because that's what any of us would do in those times. And we will take advantage of any type of benefit that we have to help us achieve that goal. And then I think from a leadership standpoint, if a leader shrugs their shoulders and says, oh, sorry, Chris, well, if you're saying that you can't get it off because the system won't let you, then I guess you can't have it off. Right? Or a leader can say like, hey, okay, talk to me about this. Like if you need this time off, I know, maybe you don't ask for time all the time, or when you do, you're ahead of the time, or you're doing the right thing by trying to plan for this time a month or 2 months ahead of time. What's going on? Because if this is important to you, we have to figure out a way to make this work. And we have the conversation and we see what we can do to make it work. And we work around efforts, and maybe we swap some shifts and we ask for people to like, who knows? I don't know. I'm just saying that we will make an attempt to do what's right for you when you're asking for this time, instead of just again shrugging. Well, I guess we can't. We can't do it. So again, it's not. I know this is a very specific example, maybe of somebody trying to get a day off. But what I'm saying is that it's a mentality of let's talk about this. Let's figure this out. What can we do? How can we do it? Maybe what you need is not the whole day. Maybe what you need is just 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon. Maybe what we can work out is that you do come in that morning, you work, and then we get you out of here by a decent time for you to get to what you got to get to. And then we work with somebody else who needed the day off, but really they only needed the morning off. So who knows? But like these are things that, again, on the surface, if we subscribe to like just the initial, well, we can't do it in here's the reasons why, versus we will figure out a way to do our best to make this happen, I would imagine it would mean a lot to you. That we went through this effort of figuring out what we could do to get you the time that you needed. And that's really what we're talking about in this new kind of day and age, and this idea of leadership and things that we can commit to doing, is we can make it about doing everything we can to help you get what you're trying to get done, so that you know that we are here for the conversation and the dialogue. We are here to solve what's going on, and we're not going to just shut it down on the surface.
Where this is almost second nature is in a startup culture, a startup mentality, because there are no systems or rules. You're kind of making it up as you go along, and because you're making it up as you go along, you don't feel constrained by a system or a rule book or whatever it is. When an organization has been around for a long time, there needs to be systems in place, and those systems work. for 95% of the times. But if you force yourself to use them exactly as they were designed for 100% of the times, then that 5% is going to be like shoving a round peg into a square hole, and you're going to cause more problems than if you were able to maintain that kind of think outside the box mindset as a leader. Because anybody, you know what the difference is? Following the rule book, that's management. Leadership is the ambiguity. Leadership is living in this space where it says, you know what, the rules say this, and this works most of the time. And there's a reason why the rules are in place, and that's because it should be a real easy go-to for the majority of the time. But sometimes they don't fit. Sometimes the rules don't fit. And for this particular situation, as a leader, if I can ground the decision in values of the organization, in values of my own leadership style, if I'm not playing favorites, but I'm really meeting somebody where they are, and I'm making sure that I'm thinking about what the long-term picture is, and I can articulate that, that's a very good thing. Going by this is what the rule says, so this is what we have to do. A lot of times that can end up being the worst thing you can do, and it's not leadership, it's management. Anybody can read a rule book, right? The leadership element is how do we think outside the box, and how do we use it sparingly enough to where when we do it, it's looked upon as this must have been really needed because this isn't happening every single day. If it's happening every single day, then you probably need to rethink what filters through that. If every system is not working for you and you're breaking rules left and right, that's not a good thing either, right? But if you know the rules and you play by them the majority of the time, and then sometimes they have to be broken, articulate it in a way that aligns with the values. And again, you can find ways of solving this problem as a leader for your people. And then guess what? You get to take credit for it, right? You get to, as the leader, you get to say, this is what I've done. And it's amazing what that will do as far as endearing you to your people. And when that person comes to work, if you got them that day off in your example, when they come back to work after that, think about the difference in their level of commitment or their engagement versus if you had said no. What is the best case scenario if in your example you say, no, we can't make this happen? I can only think of two scenarios. One, they listen to you and they really need the job, so they come in anyway and they miss that thing with their family. And they become the quiet quitter who does exactly the minimum to get by. They disengage completely and they start searching for a new job in the background, and you lose somebody who was a really decent employee. Or the other scenario is they wake up with a fever that day that you can't prove and you'll never know about, and then you end up short-staffed anyway, and not planning for that happening, which means now you're reacting to it as opposed to planning in advance. Those are the only two scenarios that could happen if you say no in the example you gave. So there's only upside to thinking outside the box and how to solve these problems, replacing can't with will.
And I'll give you a great example of a really bad implementation of the can't and will thing. And I saw this video the other day. There was a woman who is wheelchair bound and went on a flight. And they had, they kind of brought her down into the plane, put her in the front of the seats near where the door is to get on and off the plane. Makes a lot of sense. And that's good there. She needed to use the restroom. And they said that they can't let her use the first class restroom, which was not more than maybe 8 feet from where she was at, according to her. She ended up having to drag herself, because there's no space for a wheelchair in between the aisles of the airplane, through the airplane all the way to the back of the plane.
Like on the ground?
On the ground. Video of her and her partner. Like this is an international airline. But posted this online of, dragging herself down the aisle of the airplane to get to the restroom at the very back of the plane, because they had, seated her up front to use the restroom, and then drag herself back to her seat. And her post was extremely gracious in the fact of saying the intent of sharing this is to say that there's an accessibility problem with the airline, and that it's not really made accessible for people that utilize a wheelchair. And she took very much the high ground, but she definitely documented the entire thing and was able to share that. And to your point, okay, so like, the rule book says we can't let somebody from coach utilize maybe the restroom in first class. But I will make the exception because this just makes sense. And this is what we should do in the moment.
I have two thoughts here. One, I'm speechless. First of all, I hadn't seen that video yet. So I'm going to go try to find it and watch it. There's no way that employees on that airplane watched that happen and thought to themselves, yep, that's what's supposed to happen. This is the result of first-class passengers repeatedly vocalizing that coach passengers are just walking up to use the first-class restroom back and forth, and it's not available for them to use, which in general, again, that is the right thing. There's a first-class restroom, there's a coach restroom. And in general, that is the right rule. Enough first-class passengers complain about it, and then the leadership of the organization, who is not on the plane, says, all right, we've got too many of these complaints. We're done. No more coach people using the first-class restroom. First-class people are complaining. They're the ones we make the money off of. We're not going to go about this anymore. And then you have employees who are saying, we can't do this. We can't step in or we're going to get in trouble. This is what happens when you have a culture in your organization that says the rules are so important that there is no flexibility. That's what happened because the flight attendants who are watching this happen are cringing to themselves too. They are watching this happening going, this is sad and this is scary and I can't believe this is happening. But if I do something, I'm going to get in trouble. That's scary to me. That if you have people who won't just step up and say this is ridiculous, I'm going to step up. Good luck being the organization that fired a flight attendant for letting the person use the first class restroom for that. Think about the backlash that would happen against an organization who you'd be promoted. You get your job back and a promotion and a GoFundMe and $500,000. That's what you'd end up getting if you were the employee that was fired for helping that customer use the first class restroom. So this is exactly right. This is what happens when we say that we are so rigid on something because the rules say something and we can't think outside the box. It's a sad state of affairs.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 minute hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
The 1 minute hack.
All right, for this episode's 1 minute hack, here's what I want you to do. Get out your pen and paper, and I want you to write down the last 3 to 5 times that you said that you can't do something to one of your people. And it could be a big thing or a small thing. It could be, I want a raise. Sorry, I can't give you a raise. To, I want this day off. Sorry, I can't get you this day off. To, I want to take care of this customer or this client in this way. Sorry, we can't take care of this customer or this client in this way. Anything where you said that this can't be done. Write down the last 3 to 5 times this happened. And then I want you to think outside the box on how could you have made something happen that satisfies what that person was asking for, even if you really couldn't do precisely what they were asking for. Think about how you can find that way of threading the needle between following the values, following the rules, if there's a balance there, and in a way that makes everybody happy. If you are able to come up with things for those elements, then that's fantastic. You're on your way. Go back to those people who you said you can't to and tell them that. Even if it's too late to make a change on how it was done, you can tell them, hey, I reflected on this, and you know what? You were right in asking me this. I know it's kind of too late to go back on it, but I don't want you to hesitate to ask next time because I think I found a way to work through this with you. Or if it can be rectified, if it's still kind of hanging in limbo here, then you can rectify it and go back and tell the person, here's what I've come up with in order to find a solution. It might not be exactly what you were looking for, but I want you to know that when you ask something of me, that it's not just here's what the rule says. It's I really want to think outside the box here and figure out how to make this work for you as best as we can. While maintaining a commitment to at least whatever systems are in place. Get in that mindset and you will get a team of people who come to you more and ask you for things as opposed to people who just assume that you're going to be a manager who follows the rules and doesn't think outside the box.
Yeah, I think it's a great 1 minute hack. And I think establishing with people that you are willing at least just to have the conversation to figure it out. I think that's such an important thing. And I think that's at really the heart of this part of the article is just, how do people feel about that, and are you willing to converse with them and figure things out? And there are definitely things. I mean, everybody will point to the things that are absolute must in regards to we can't do that, right? We can't give away everything for free. We can't just do this. We can't do there are many things, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the large gray area of decisions that are made daily, where there is some potential dialogue, conversation that can happen. There are some ways that you can, adjust things or work towards figuring things out. But just that idea in having people see your actions in place will then, to your point, allow them to want to approach you to talk about these things. And I think that's really the space that everybody wants to be in from a leadership standpoint. Give us a chance to have the conversation, to see what we can figure out. That way people know that you're willing to hear them out, willing to discuss strategies that may be working, that may not be working, and willing to challenge status quo to figure out a solution that works best for all parties involved.
I've said many, many times on this show that one of your responsibilities as a leader is to be predictable. And because if you're predictable as a leader, your people they'll know what to expect from you in advance of asking. They know that they're not asking themselves, "Oh, is Lorenzo going to be in a good mood or a bad mood today?" Like, be predictable as a leader. That's very important. This might seem to fly in the face of that, right? Like, predictable to me implies black and white, a lack of gray. No, that's not what this is. Be predictable in that when you live in the space of gray, and which there is a lot of, more so than you might think, that you are predictable in moving forward with your values as opposed to something else. If a person asks you a question or asks something of you and it falls in the gray, they should be able to know in advance what you'll do, that you will come up with some reason. You'll come up with some way to make this work in a way that makes everybody happy, even if it's not exactly what the ask was. If you can be that leader, that will serve you very, very well as you go forward, as opposed to the person who, we can go ask Lorenzo, that he may say yes, he may say no. It's not about saying yes or no. It's about how do we take into account all the players in this game, and make sure that we're leading with our values and not with a rule book.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.